In this section, we're going to be talking about the data structure that Lore uses, and it helps to start by asking the question of why is data structure important? And to illustrate that, we're going to take a look at a tweet component, like the one that we'll be creating later in the tutorial. And this tweet component is going to need to get some data that represents a tweet. And so the question we're exploring here is, what does this data look like? So if we take a look at our server response, the response we get back if we hit /tweets looks something like this. And one option to define this data structure is to take the data that represents a tweet from this response, extract it, and pass it directly into the component. And if we do this, then we can definitely take that data in the render method and we can render out a tweet. The challenge shows up later when you don't only have to read tweets, but you have to create them and interact with them in ways that are realistic of large applications. So, for example, one thing this data structure doesn't let us know is whether the specific tweet is being loaded, or perhaps we're updating a tweet and we need to know if this tweet is being updated so that we can sort of fade out of view to give a visual cue. Or maybe we tried to update the tweet and there was an error with it, and so we want to let the user know that there was an error updating their tweet. And this data structure, while simple, isn't really something that's going to get you very far in your application development. So let's take a look at what Lore does to simplify this challenge. So we're going to be looking at a simple version of a tweet coming from the server. And what Lore does is it takes the data that comes back and it wraps it in a data structure that looks like this. Initially, this might seem a bit complicated, but each of these fields are here to solve a very specific problem. So the ID field, for example, is necessary to know the ID of the resource on the server. So you're going to use this for creating, updating, deleting resources. The CID stands for client-side ID, and this is necessary to address challenges like optimistic updates and simplify some synchronization challenges with multi-step wizards. The state is a descriptive label that declares what's happening to that data. So for example, right here it says it's updating, and this would allow the component to know that this tweet is currently being updated by the user. And you can see examples of additional states that exist by default for creating data, fetching data, and error states for each of those. The data structure is where the data from the server is sort of put exactly as it is. And then the error structure, if there happened to be an error updating, for example, then whatever error information on the server returns would be put in this field. So you could easily check if there was an error updating and then reference this field to see exactly what the error was. So if we switch our tweet component over to a feed component, then we can look through the same example, but for what happens for a list of tweets. So here we're going to use the same simple data structure from the server, but it's going to be an array that we need to pass around the application. So once again, Lore wraps this data in a data structure, and the structure is always going to be an object. And for collections, we're also going to have a state field, but it's going to be simpler. It's mostly just going to represent whether data is being fetched or if there is an error. The data structure is going to be an array of the information from the server, but in this case, each of these is going to be wrapped in the data structure we just covered. And the error field is going to exist to store any errors the server returns, such as if you were trying to fetch data and you don't have access to it, or perhaps you exceeded a rate limit, or any of these other real-world challenges. And with that, we're ready to begin this section, and we're going to be mocking out some data for our feed.